Have you ever noticed the quiet, heavy shame that creeps in when you feel like you are falling behind in life? You look around, and everyone else seems to be moving faster, achieving more, and arriving at the destinations you are still desperately walking toward. If you have ever felt stuck, embarrassed by the speed of your own journey, or exhausted from constantly trying to catch up to an invisible finish line, this is for you. Stay until the end, because the final lesson may completely change the way you see your own timeline forever. What if the feeling that you are failing is simply a story you have been conditioned to believe? We carry invisible clocks in our minds. By this age, you should have it all figured out. By this year, you should have the career, the relationship, the stability, the success. When our reality does not match this rigid mental schedule, a deep sense of embarrassment takes root. We begin to hide our struggles. We begin to abandon ourselves, quietly believing that because our pace is slower, our worth is somehow lesser. We silently punish ourselves for not being exactly where we expected to be. Buddhist wisdom teaches us a very different truth about time and progress. Much of our suffering does not come from where we actually are in life, but from our intense attachment to where we think we should be. We cling tightly to an illusion of how our lives ought to unfold. We measure our real, complex, unfolding lives against a manufactured standard of perfection. But the tighter you hold on to this imaginary timeline, the more you suffer. You miss the profound reality of where you currently stand, because your eyes are frantically fixed on a horizon that keeps moving. You are suffering not because your life is wrong, but because you are rejecting the present moment. Imagine a deep, wide river flowing toward the ocean. The river does not rush. It does not look at the sky and apologize for not being the wind. It simply moves, carving its path through stone and soil, navigating bends and obstacles at its own natural pace. When you feel embarrassed by the speed of your life, you are like a person standing waist-deep in that river, exhausted, violently pushing the water with your hands, trying to force it to flow faster. But you cannot push a river. It has its own rhythm, it has its own timing, and yet it always reaches the ocean. Think about your own life. How much energy have you spent fighting the natural current of your own existence? How many days have you lost by looking at a colleague, a friend, or a stranger and instantly deciding that your own life is a failure? You feel the sting of being left behind. You feel the heavy weight of inadequacy. But ask yourself, whose timeline are you actually trying to follow? Who told you that moving slowly means you are lost? Pause. Breathe. Observe the thought of falling behind without following it down into the dark. Let the feeling of embarrassment rise, but do not make it your identity. It is just a thought, a passing cloud in the vast, quiet sky of your awareness. You do not have to chase a speed that feels violent to your soul. You do not have to apologize for the season you are in. You can simply do your part and release the outcome. Because peace is not found by finally winning a race you never signed up for. It is found by making space for the truth of where you are right now. But letting go of this imaginary timeline is only the first step. To truly find peace, we must look very closely at the false mirrors we are using to judge ourselves. And this is where the next truth begins. 2. The illusion of the edited life. Here is a truth that is incredibly difficult to remember when you are staring at a screen. The reality you are comparing yourself to does not actually exist. We live in a deeply connected world where everyone's life is on display, yet almost completely hidden. You see the sudden promotions, the smiling relationships, the flawless vacations, and the milestones easily reached. But you do not see the silent tears, the deep anxieties, the broken promises, the failures, or the empty, lonely moments. Yet, we take this curated gallery of perfection and use it as a weapon against ourselves. We look at someone else's carefully edited success and feel a deep, burning shame about our own chaotic, unedited reality. We feel embarrassed that our lives are so ordinary, so slow, and so filled with struggle. In Buddhist thought, much of our suffering stems from our attachment to illusions. We mistake the surface of things for the deep truth of things. We suffer because we believe the mirages presented to us, forgetting that every single human life is bound by the same truths of impermanence, loss, and difficulty. When we attach our self-worth to an illusion of perfection, we trap our minds in a cycle of endless inadequacy. We forget to see things as they truly are. Imagine a beautiful lake on a still night, perfectly reflecting the bright, glowing moon. From the shore, the reflection looks whole, solid, and completely flawless. You might look at the rough, muddy ground beneath your own feet and feel deeply inferior compared to that glowing perfection on the water. But if you were to wade into the lake and try to hold that glowing moon, the water would break. The image would instantly shatter into 1,000 scattered ripples. It was never solid. It was only an image of light playing on the surface. This is what you are comparing yourself to when you look at the edited lives of others. Social media is a flawless reflection on the surface of a screen. You are comparing the heavy, complex, breathing reality of your actual life to a reflection that would shatter the moment you tried to touch it. When you scroll through feeds and feel that familiar tightening in your chest, the embarrassment that your life is not moving fast enough, that you have not achieved enough, you are suffering over a mirage. You are judging your real, unfolding journey against a story that has had all the pain, doubt, and waiting surgically removed. Ask yourself, how many times have you let a stranger's edited picture dictate your inner peace? How much of your self-doubt was born simply because you looked at someone else's carefully constructed illusion and believed it was the whole truth? Are these images bringing you peace, or are they feeding your fear? Pause. Breathe. The next time you feel that wave of comparison wash over you, recognize the illusion. Observe the glowing screen without letting it enter your soul. You do not have to absorb it. Tell yourself, I am comparing my reality to a shadow. Let the feeling of inadequacy rise. See it for what it is, and gently let it pass. Because peace is not found by building a better illusion for others to applaud. It is found by resting in the unedited, messy, profound truth of your own life. But when we constantly measure ourselves against these false reflections, we begin to do something far more damaging than just feeling inadequate. We start to turn away from our own path entirely. And this is where the next truth begins. 3. The danger of abandoning yourself. What if the real tragedy of your life is not that you are moving too slowly, but that in your frantic rush to catch up, you are completely leaving yourself behind? Here is a quiet truth few people want to face. When you are deeply embarrassed by your current season, you begin to reject the person experiencing it. You start to view your own life as an enemy. You hide your true interests, you mask your exhaustion, and you push yourself beyond your natural limits to force a result that is simply not ready. You look at the blistering pace of the world, and you decide that your own rhythm is a flaw that must be punished. In doing so, you commit the quietest, most painful betrayal of all. You abandon yourself. Buddhist wisdom reminds us that true peace can never be found through self-rejection. When we constantly judge where we are, we split our minds in two. There is the self that is living in this moment, and the self that is standing just outside, harshly criticizing it. This internal division creates immense suffering. Mindfulness teaches us that we cannot heal a wound by hating the body that carries it. We cannot find our way by rejecting the very ground we are standing on. True awareness requires us to sit with our struggles. It demands the radical act of refusing to abandon yourself in your moment of difficulty. Imagine a small seed planted deep in the dark, quiet earth. It has everything it needs to eventually become a strong, deeply rooted tree. But growth in the dark is slow. It is silent and invisible. Now imagine if the gardener, impatient and embarrassed that the soil was still bare while neighboring gardens wildly bloomed, kept digging up the seed every single day to check on its progress. The seed would never grow. In the desperate attempt to force the timeline, the gardener destroys the exact stillness the seed needs to survive. When you constantly criticize yourself for feeling behind in life, you are digging up your own roots. You are so focused on the external pressure to succeed, the timeline of your peers, and the fear of failure that you rip yourself out of your own grounding. You exhaust yourself trying to skip the quiet, necessary phases of your own development. You fake certainty. You bury your loneliness. You pretend to be further along, all while starving the very soul you are trying to grow. Ask yourself, in your rush to meet an invisible standard, what parts of yourself have you abandoned? Have you sacrificed your inner peace just to maintain the appearance of progress? Are you walking beside yourself as a friend, or standing over yourself as a cruel judge? Stop. Breathe. For just one moment, look at the version of you that feels embarrassed, lost, and behind. Offer that version your presence instead of your judgment. Let the feeling of inadequacy rise without making it a reason to abandon yourself. Because true progress is not about running faster to please a world that is not paying attention. It is about learning to walk alongside yourself without letting go of your own hand. But to stay rooted in who we are, we must understand the true nature of how our lives actually unfold. And this is where the next truth begins. 4. The wisdom of the blooming flower. What if the delay you are so deeply ashamed of is not a failure, but a necessary preparation? Here is the truth about our impatience. We live in a society that worships speed and early arrival. We want to skip the awkward phase of not knowing, the painful phase of building, and the quiet phase of waiting. When we look around and see others landing their dream jobs, finding their partners, or moving into the next chapter of their lives, a quiet panic sets in. We stare at our own seemingly bare branches and feel a deep sense of embarrassment. We try to force our lives to move faster. We make desperate choices, not because they are right for our path, but because we are terrified of being the last one to arrive. In Buddhist thought, there is a profound understanding of conditions and natural law. Everything in the universe arises only when the conditions for its existence are completely right, not a moment sooner, and not a moment later. Suffering happens when our ego demands that life bypasses its natural rhythm just to soothe our insecurity. One of the deepest lessons of Buddhism is the practice of acceptance, the quiet surrender to the reality that you cannot force the timeline of your own unfolding. When you fight the season you are in, you are fighting reality itself. Imagine a vast, quiet garden. In this garden, a cherry blossom blooms brilliantly in the early spring, showering the world in delicate petals. But deep in the pond nearby, a lotus seed is still resting silently in the dark mud. It is not moving. It is not showing any outward signs of beauty or progress. If the lotus had a human mind, it might look at the cherry blossom and feel an agonizing shame. It might try to violently push through the water before it is ready, tearing its own stem in a desperate bid to be seen. But the lotus does not rush. It waits in the dark, gathering nutrients from the mud, trusting that when the light and warmth are exactly right, it will rise and open flawlessly. Think about your own life. You are holding yourself to the blooming schedule of the people around you. You are trying to force a career to peak, a relationship to materialize, or an inner wound to heal. Simply because someone else has already reached their springtime, you feel the heavy pressure to succeed right now. You compare your quiet, unseen growth in the mud to the visible, loud success of others. But you are not them. Your conditions are entirely different. Your deepest roots require a different kind of time. Ask yourself, are you harshly judging your own winter because you are comparing it to someone else's spring? What would happen if you finally stopped apologizing for the season you are in? Pause, breathe, look around your life and observe the rush. Notice the desperate urge to speed things up. Let the feeling of impatience rise, acknowledge it, and gently let it go. Stop trying to pry your own petals open before they are ready. Do your daily work, honor your current season, and release the demand for instant sunlight. Because peace is not found by forcing the bloom. It is found by trusting the soil you are planted in. But trusting your own unfolding is nearly impossible when you are constantly seeking permission from the outside world to feel proud of yourself. And this is where the next truth begins. 5. Releasing the need for external validation. What if the applause you are so desperately chasing is the very thing keeping you trapped? Here is a painful truth about our modern lives. When you constantly need others to tell you that you are doing well, you quietly hand over the keys to your own inner peace. We live in an era of constant performance. We share our milestones, we announce our moves, and we silently wait for the validation of the crowd to confirm that our lives actually have meaning. When the praise, the likes, or the acknowledgement do not arrive, we feel a crushing sense of embarrassment. We assume our slow progress is invisible, or worse, unworthy. We begin to mold our choices to fit what is popular, abandoning our true desires, just to hear someone say, we are on the right track. We bend to the expectations of family, friends, and the internet, exhausting ourselves to prove we are not falling behind. Buddhist wisdom teaches that seeking peace outside of yourself is like drinking salt water to quench a deep thirst. It only leaves you more desperate. One of the core teachings of non-attachment reminds us that external praise is entirely impermanent. It is as unpredictable as the weather. Today, the world may celebrate you. Tomorrow, it may completely ignore you. If your self-worth is attached to this shifting breeze, your emotional state will always be unstable. Buddhism reminds us that the ego feeds on approval, but the ego is never satisfied. True freedom arrives when you stop asking the distracted world to validate your existence and start resting firmly in your own inherent worth. Imagine a single candle trying to burn brightly in a wide, open field. It is constantly flickering, struggling, and on the verge of dying out because it is entirely at the mercy of the wind. When the breeze blows hard, the flame violently leans, fighting to survive. Every gust of wind is a threat to its existence. But imagine moving that exact same candle into a quiet, still room with the doors closed. The flame immediately steadies. It burns tall, calm, and bright, not because it suddenly gained more fire, but because it is no longer being pushed around by forces outside of its control. When you rely on external validation, your self-worth is that candle in the open field. A good review at work makes you burn bright. An ignored text, a lack of social media engagement, or a friend's sudden success threatens to completely extinguish you. You feel deeply embarrassed by the speed of your life because you are letting the shifting winds of other people's opinions dictate how brightly you are allowed to shine. You feel invisible because you are waiting for a world that is constantly looking at its own reflection to stop and notice you. Ask yourself, how much of your current exhaustion comes from performing for an audience that isn't really watching? What would your life look like if you no longer needed anyone else to tell you that your pace is acceptable? What are you afraid will happen if you simply stop performing? Pause, breathe. Notice the desperate urge to be seen and validated. Observe the thought without judging it and without letting it dictate your next move. The next time you feel the sting of being ignored or left behind, bring your awareness gently back to your own center. You do not need to perform. You are allowed to be quiet. Because true peace is not found when the world finally claps for you. It is found when you no longer need the applause, but learning to stand securely in your own unedited reality requires a profound shift in how we handle the things we cannot change. And this is where the next truth begins. 6. The practice of radical acceptance. What if your exhaustion is not caused by the speed of your life, but by your endless silent war against it? Here is the truth few people want to face. When we feel deeply embarrassed by where we are, we naturally try to reject it. We wake up every single day quietly arguing with reality. We tell ourselves that we should not be here. We should have more stability by now. We should have the career, the connection, or the peace of mind that everyone else seemingly flaunts online. We look at the painful gap between where we are and where we expected to be, and we treat our present moment like a prison. This constant, bitter resistance drains our spirit. We burn all of our energy wishing we were on a different path, leaving us with absolutely nothing left to help us walk the path we are actually on. In Buddhist thought, there is a profound distinction between pain and suffering. Pain is the natural, unavoidable friction of living. You may lose an opportunity, face a rejection, or simply need more time to find your way. That is pain. But suffering is what happens when you refuse to accept that reality. Suffering is the heavy story you tell yourself about how unfair it is, or how far behind you are. Buddhism teaches the practice of radical acceptance. Acceptance does not mean giving up. It does not mean you do not wish to grow. It simply means you stop demanding that the present moment be something other than what it is. It is the brave, quiet decision to drop your argument with the universe. Imagine a person who has stepped into a patch of deep, sinking mud. Panic immediately sets in. Terrified and embarrassed, they thrash violently, fighting to pull themselves out, furious at the mud and ashamed that they are stuck. But the harder they violently fight, the faster they sink. Their own desperate resistance becomes their trap. Now imagine someone else in that exact same mud. They stop. They do not fight it. They accept the reality of where they are. By stopping the struggle and spreading their weight, they stop sinking. They find stillness in the mess. And only from that quiet place of acceptance can they slowly, deliberately find their way back to solid ground. When you constantly judge yourself for feeling behind, you are thrashing in the mud. You scroll through the flawless, edited lives of others, and then turn around and violently reject your own. You fight the reality that you are starting over. You fight the fact that you are still healing. You fight the truth that your journey is moving slower than you planned. But your desperate rejection of today does not bring a better tomorrow any faster. It only pulls you deeper into darkness. Ask yourself, how much of your daily exhaustion comes from simply arguing with reality? What would happen if you completely dropped the argument today? What if you stopped demanding that your life look different right now? Pause, breathe. Notice the tight, heavy grip of resistance in your chest. Observe it, and then gently open your hands. Say to yourself, this is exactly where I am right now, and I will not abandon myself in it. Stop trying to force the door open. Do not fight the mud, because peace is not found by finally escaping your current life. It is found by completely surrendering to it. But acceptance alone is not enough if your mind is constantly traveling to a future that does not yet exist. And this is where the next truth begins. 7. Finding peace in the present moment. What if the future you are so anxiously running toward is entirely made of the present moments you are currently throwing away? Here is the heartbreaking reality of feeling behind in life. When you are deeply embarrassed by your current pace, you begin to treat the present moment as an enemy. You look at today not as a gift, but as an uncomfortable waiting room. You tell yourself, I will finally be happy when I get that promotion, when I find that relationship, when I finally catch up to everyone else. Because today feels inadequate, you refuse to live in it. Your body is sitting in your room, but your mind is 1,000 miles away, frantically projecting into a future where you are finally successful, or agonizing over a past where you think you made the wrong turn. In your desperation to reach a better tomorrow, you are completely missing the life that is happening right now. Buddhism teaches us that the past is a memory and the future is an illusion. The only place where life actually exists, and the only place where peace can ever be found, is in the present moment. When we constantly reject the now because it does not look like the edited lives on our screens, we create immense suffering. We become ghosts, haunting our own lives, never fully arriving, never fully present. Mindfulness is the gentle, powerful act of bringing your attention back to where your body actually is. It is the realization that this exact moment, with all of its imperfections, is the only life you truly have. Imagine a traveler walking through a magnificent, ancient forest. The air is crisp, the sunlight is softly filtering through the leaves, and the path is lined with quiet beauty. But the traveler is terribly embarrassed that they have not reached the end of the trail yet. Other hikers passed them hours ago. So, instead of looking up, the traveler stares obsessively at their map. They walk with their head down, frantically pacing, tripping over roots, and ignoring the breeze. When they finally reach the end of the trail exhausted, they realize a quiet tragedy. They survived the journey, but they never actually experienced the forest. This is what happens when you let the embarrassment of your own timeline pull you out of the present. You scroll through social media, seeing friends hit milestones you are still waiting for, and immediately your mind begins to panic. You stop tasting your food, you stop hearing the birds, you stop appreciating the quiet safety of your own room. You spend your entire day mentally pacing the aisles of a moving train, trying to force it to go faster, completely missing the view outside the window. Ask yourself, how many days have you physically lived, but completely missed because you were trapped in the anxiety of falling behind? What small, beautiful things are you rushing past today, just because you are angry that you are not further along? Pause, breathe. Bring your mind back to where your body is. Feel your feet resting on the floor. Listen to the quiet sounds in the room. Let the panic of the future rise, and then gently anchor yourself in the now. You do not need to solve the rest of your life today. You only need to be here for this exact moment. Because peace is not a destination you finally arrive at in the future. It is a space you make room for right now. But to truly rest in the present, we must first release the heavy guilt we carry for how long it took us to get here. And this is where the next truth begins. 8. Forgiving yourself for the speed of your journey. What if the heaviest weight you are carrying is not your current reality, but the quiet, relentless punishment you inflict on yourself for how long it took to get here? Here is a painful truth about healing. Even when we begin to accept our present moment, a lingering shadow of guilt often remains. We look backward. We calculate the years we spent wandering, the relationships that drained us, the career paths that led nowhere, and the time we seemingly wasted. We look at the perfectly edited timelines on our screens, where people seemingly move in a straight, unbroken line towards success, and we feel a deep, burning regret. We become angry at our own history. We refuse to forgive ourselves for taking the long way around. We silently declare that because our journey was messy, unpolished, and slow, it was somehow wrong. In Buddhist thought, holding on to guilt is like grasping a burning coal with the intention of throwing it at your past. You are the only one who gets burned. The practice of loving kindness teaches us that compassion must begin with the self. We cannot heal our lives while continuously stabbing our own history with regret. Buddhism reminds us that there are no truly wasted steps on the path of awareness. Every detour, every delay, and every stumble was a necessary teacher. To refuse to forgive your past is to reject the very soil that grew your current wisdom. Imagine a small wooden boat navigating across a vast, unpredictable ocean. For weeks, the boat is caught in a thick, blinding fog and violent storms. To survive, the sailor must lower the sails and drift slowly, carefully feeling the way through the dark, turbulent waters to avoid crashing against hidden rocks. Finally, the storm breaks, the fog lifts. The boat safely arrives at the harbor. But instead of feeling a profound sense of relief, the sailor looks at the larger ships resting peacefully in the dock and feels intense shame. The sailor curses the small boat for arriving so late, completely forgetting the blinding fog and the violent waves it had to navigate just to survive. This is exactly what you do when you refuse to forgive yourself. You look at friends or strangers online who seemingly sailed on clear days, with gentle winds and open skies. You compare your delayed arrival to their swift, edited journey. But you forget your own fog. You forget the silent battles you fought, the invisible grief you carried, the heartbreak you had to heal from, and the confusion you had to blindly navigate. You are judging your survival against someone else's highlight reel. You are punishing yourself for moving slowly through a storm you did not ask for. Ask yourself, are you holding a grudge against yourself for surviving the best way you knew how? Will punishing yourself for the speed of your past finally bring you peace in the present? Pause. Breathe. Look back at the earlier versions of yourself without anger. Observe the heavy burden of regret. See it for the illusion it is, and gently lay it down. You did the best you could with the light you had at the time. You do not need to apologize for the miles it took to find yourself, because true peace is not found by wishing you had run faster. It is found by honoring the strength it took to simply keep moving through the dark. But forgiving the past is only complete when we finally release our desperate grip on what comes next. And this is where the final truth begins. 9. Trusting the unfolding of your own life. What if the ultimate act of courage is to stop trying to force your life and simply trust it? We began this journey looking at the heavy, quiet shame that creeps in when you feel like you are falling behind. We looked at the invisible clocks we carry, the flawless, edited lives we scroll past on our screens, and the frantic, exhausting pace we force upon ourselves just to feel worthy of existing. You have spent so much of your time apologizing for the speed of your journey. You have abandoned yourself, judged your own seasons, and fought fiercely against the reality of your own timeline. You believed that if you were not moving at the blistering speed of the world around you, you were somehow failing. But Buddhist wisdom offers us a final, profound invitation, the practice of deep trust. Trusting the unfolding of your life is not about giving up on your dreams. It is not about passive resignation. It is the realization that you are not the manager of the universe. It is the deep, cellular knowing that your life has its own unique rhythm, and that this rhythm is not a mistake you need to fix. When we let go of our fierce attachment to the outcomes, the timelines, and the expectations of others, we do not fall apart. Instead, we finally fall into place. We step out of the illusion of control and into the vast, quiet peace of what is real. Think back to the river we spoke of in the very beginning, the river flowing naturally toward the ocean. For years, you have been standing in the water, desperately pushing the current, terrified that if you did not violently force it, the water would never reach the sea. You looked at the reflections on the surface, the edited mirages of other people's success, and you let those illusions convince you that your river was broken. You fought the mud, you cursed the storms, and you missed the quiet beauty of the present moment you were moving through. But the river was always moving. It never needed you to push it. Think about your own life right now. You are exactly where you need to be. The delays, the waiting, the quiet periods of unseen growth, they are not signs of failure. They are the very conditions required for your unique unfolding. The world will always try to sell you a timeline, The glowing screens will always try to sell you an illusion, but you do not have to buy them anymore. You do not have to abandon yourself to fit into a picture that isn't even real. Ask yourself one final time, what would happen if you simply let go? What if you took a deep breath, looked around at your unedited, imperfect, deeply beautiful life, and finally decided that it was enough? What if you decided that you are enough, right here, right now, at exactly this speed? Pause, breathe. Let the heavy armor of comparison fall to the ground. You are not behind. You are not late. You are walking a path that belongs entirely to you. You do not need the applause of a distracted world. You do not need your life to look like a curated gallery of milestones. You only need to be present for the quiet, profound miracle of your own existence. Release the timeline. Honor your own roots. Stop pushing the river and simply let it carry you. If these lessons touched your heart, share this video with someone who may need a little more peace today. Let life meet you where you are.